This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Focus Herbicide from FMC. When tank mixed with glyphosate, Focus Herbicide provides a complete solution. Burn off and extended control on key grassy and broadleaf weeds like wild oats, bromes, and kochia in lentils, wheat, and more. See your local retailer today.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Wednesday midweek edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast, no matter where you are, Canada, the U.S., or beyond those borders. It is great to have you here today with us on the program. Today's show is brought to you by Koch Agronomic Services. Make sure you're going to kochag.ca. That's KOCHAG.ca. You know, one of the products that Koch has is Wolftrax DDP. For balanced nutrition with micronutrients, the best answer is Wolftrax DDP from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how Wolftrax can ensure nutrient availability through a crop's growth cycle, visit kochag.ca. Okay, today on the program, we're going to hear a conversation I had last week at Commodity Classic with Tyler Schau. He is with agmarket.net. We honed in on the wheat and the canola market. And yesterday, I was in Camrose, Alberta, and you know what? Our Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index data is, I think, very, very accurate because it's exact the sentiment that we saw in January, concern about profitability and concern about the commodity markets was definitely top of mind for the 300 producers that were in attendance at the Crop Management Network meeting that I spoke at yesterday. And we're going to hear about the market outlook today from Tyler and try to get some idea in terms of, okay, are we trying to find somewhat of a bottom here? What do we do with rallies? What about this opportunity for short covering by the funds, and does that spike us higher? We got a lot of stuff to talk about with Tyler, who is based out of North Dakota. We're also going to hear today a product spotlight, of course, from our show sponsor. We're going to be hearing today from Bryce Geisel. He is with Koch Agronomic Services, and he had a chance to catch up with Lindsay Smith. Really dig into some of our Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index data as it applies to the outlook on future farm financial performance for livestock producers. We've been talking a lot about what crop producers think, but what about livestock producers? A little bit of a different tune in comparison to their cropping peers. We also got some time today for the top ag news stories of the day. If you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms, or you are very, very welcome to call the RealAg feedback line. That number is 855-776-6147. I don't know if you have seen some of the pictures and video out of parts of Western Canada from a snowfall perspective, but as I was driving home from Camrose last night, you know, we definitely wintry conditions, only about minus 15 C, but pretty low visibility from the blowing snow and some new snow falling. You know, in the last couple days, Saskatoon really got hit by some big-time snowfall, and I think like 30 centimeters about. You know, somebody correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I saw some pictures of people returning to the airport in Saskatoon, where basically you had to go to Home Hardware or Lowe's or Home Depot and get yourself a shovel because you couldn't even see the vehicle, entirely buried under a drift. So we'll take the moisture. How much moisture is in some of this dry snow, I guess time will tell, but we'll take the snowfall, and more needs to keep on coming from a moisture perspective indeed. As I talk to a lot of producers in Saskatchewan and Alberta, and they continue to point out we are dry. Well, even in southwestern Ontario as well. I'm hearing that from a lot of growers there, as the weather there has been beautiful this week. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So, March is always a very confused weather month. It is of all the months, March might be the one that tends to be the most confused in terms of what it really wants to be. Does it want to be still winter or moving into spring? And obviously we get a whole bunch of the above, like we are this year indeed. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to dig into the canola and wheat markets with Tyler Schau of agmarket.net. You're listening to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by Koch Agronomic Services. Special treat today. We have a live audience, as you've heard. We are at the Canadian Federation of Agriculture meeting in Ottawa, Ontario. Today's show is brought to you by MNP. So as Canada's chief trade negotiator, Steve Rahul was responsible for negotiating the new NAFTA agreement, the USMCA. In Canada, we call it the CUSMA. We're going to have a renegotiation in 2026 of the CUSMA agreement.
On July 1st, 2026, Canada, the U.S., and Mexico are going to have to confirm in writing that they want the agreement to continue. And if that just happens without much else going on, then we're full steam ahead. If one of those countries decides they're not going to formally commit to the continuation, then we're into a world of uncertainty, because the agreement will be in a state of having to be reviewed every year on an ongoing basis until something changes or it expires in 10 years. But I think beyond that, there's an expectation that as we lead up to July 1st, 2026, the U.S. in particular will start pushing for some kind of change. So there could be a negotiation that develops, and there could be a forward work plan coming out of that.
Have you heard of Vantage Ag? They're a manufacturer and distributor of liquid fertilizers, and they want to work with you. They want to learn more about you and your goals and build a relationship centered around high-value products and a customized approach. For more information on Vantage Ag, call Paul Sinkovich at 778-919-3370 or visit vantage.ag to get started today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by Koch Agronomic Services. Make sure you go to kochag.ca. That's KOCHAG.ca. Let's dig in right now on what's happening in the canola and the wheat market. We're going to hear from Tyler Schau. He is with agmarket.net. Him and I chatted last week at Commodity Classic. And if you're in Western Canada or the Northern Plains, you got canola and wheat in the rotation. You're a little bit frustrated here right now on some of the pricing action and what we've seen in this futures market. Of course, with wheat, that goes beyond a much larger geography than just that. But like all commodities, the farmer's really looking at this and sort of wondering, hey, what exactly is going on? I've heard from a number of growers that at this current price for canola, it really doesn't pencil out for them. But we're hearing a lot about the opportunity for things like renewable diesel. So some of this doesn't really add up. What exactly is happening in this oil seed? Let's hear what Tyler Schau from agmarket.net had to say. Right now I'm joined by Tyler Schau. Hey, Tyler, how are you doing?
Doing really good.
Okay. I was joking with you before we started. You're going to tell me that the wheat and canola market are going to lead this commodity complex to the upside, baby. Here we go. It's like a rocket ship because we have a bit of a space theme here. Yeah. Well, there is some rocket ship images around. Is that the case?
We have a problem, Houston?
Yeah.
That might be the good response. Russia is just going to be your enemy if you're a wheat farmer. Russia's just they had massive crop the last 2 years. They're working on, I think, their fourth record crop. They really have no problems right now to speak of, major problems with the winter wheat that's in the ground. They're selling it on fire sale to help finance a war campaign. And, they gave the farmer a gift 2 years ago. Not that was necessarily a great thing that happened, but that did send wheat prices screaming higher. But they're just coming in, and I think last I saw they're down to $215 a ton in the export market, FOB out of the Black Sea, which is severely under where we're at.
And with quality,
Or talk about what some of the products are that are coming out of there.
It's 12.5% protein, so it's lower quality wheat than what we're producing here. But we had a massive hard red spring wheat crop, high quality, out of North Dakota. And I know Canada dealt with some drought issues. Still kind of looking at some drought issues that we've got going on up there. But when you have that big of a quality crop come out of North Dakota, South Dakota, and the United States, there isn't that huge demand for higher quality protein wheat to really pull this thing much higher at the moment.
If you're growing canola, you're probably pairing it in the rotation there with some. Or sorry, if you're growing wheat in the rotation, you probably, in some of the geographies we're talking about, you probably have some canola in the rotation too. What sense do you make of the canola market?
It's been a tough market to really grasp. I think last couple times I've talked to you, we've talked to you about the importance canola is going to play in this renewable diesel program. We're starting to get some of those plants kicked off. It's starting to, maybe we got the cart ahead of the horse in the analyst game, expecting these big crush numbers coming out of these plants. The bottom line, though, again, huge canola crop in North Dakota last year. Yeah. I mean, look no further than the sunflower market. I don't know how close attention you pay to that, but, they can't hardly give sunflowers away right now, and that's because farmers in North and South Dakota grew 3,000-pound sunflowers with ease last year and just oversupplied the short-term market and have really just kind of wreaked havoc. I think eventually these renewable plants are going to pick steam up. They're going to start running. They're going to start operating better, and some of that demand will pick up. The other thing to throw in there is China is really kind of hurting that vegetable oil market. They're bringing vegetable oil over to qualify for those tax credits. It's got to be either used vegetable oil, and so they're sending some palm oil over, throwing a French fry in it, claiming that it's been used. Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't, but they're flooding that market with that, quote, used vegetable oil, which has been tough on the soybean oil market.
Some are speculating that in Western Canada we're going to see about a 10% drop, maybe, on the canola acre. What's expected in North Dakota?
I've been hearing about that 5 to 10%, just talking to some of the seed dealers in the area, Western North Dakota. One of the things I will throw out, one thing that might be a decent spot for spring wheat is the fact that in that eastern North Dakota area, you've got Green Bison, which is a soy crush facility in Spiritwood, North Dakota. They've been struggling getting running and operating at full capacity. Just talked to the North Dakota Soybean Council rep yesterday. He told me that they think they've pretty well got all the problems ironed out. They're going to be running pretty full bore here pretty soon. The new one that's going to open up in Castleton, they expect that one to kick off this summer. Should have all the kinks worked out of it by harvest time. So one of the things that we're seeing is a lot of farmers in eastern North Dakota looking to switch out acres from canola and spring wheat and go to soybeans in that area because there's going to be a huge pull for soybeans. That might help pull some acres out of that number, and so instead of seeing that 11 to 12 million acres of spring wheat in the U.S., we might be able to pull a million off of that just out of North Dakota alone.
In North Dakota, when you look at some of the penciling out the profit margins of each of the crops, how does soybeans fit in comparison to corn?
Soybeans are, better than corn. We'll start off with that. There is a small profit. You can still pencil out a profit with $11 soybeans. So that's going to be helpful. Corn does not look good. It's just hard to switch it anyway. But as Matt was kind of alluding to earlier, the market doesn't owe a producer a profit. And I know a lot of times we wish it does or wish it would. We hope it will. But just remember that sometimes, as I heard him mention, you might not like selling it here, but how do you like selling it 50 cents lower? How do you like selling spring wheat $1 lower?
There was a while, though, there where canola was kind of, even when the rest of the market was in the red, canola, you look on the screen, and canola was in the green, right? What's it going to take? You mentioned renewable diesel, but that's a little bit more of a long-term play. But what's it going to take for us to stabilize this canola number? Because we continue to hear from farmers in our audience, I don't know, it doesn't pencil for me.
Short term, like right now, the trade focuses a lot of attention on the managed money position on corn and soybeans and wheat. Not a lot of people pay attention to the canola numbers. That's a record short by the funds in the canola market. I think it's like 150,000 net short contracts, huge record short. Same story in corn. If we get something that spooks those fund managers into exiting their short positions, you would think they would, especially with this. I mean, when the bulk of your crop is grown in North Dakota and Canada and it's been prone to drought the last few years, that might get some of them to get spooked, exit those short positions. That could cause a decent little short-term rally. Gives the producer an opportunity to get caught up on old crop sales. Also gives the producer an opportunity to catch up on new crop. The one thing I would caution, same with the corn market, is there's still a lot of bushels out there that need to be priced. And farmers are going to be itching to pull the trigger. So farmers selling, hedge pressure is going to kind of probably, I won't say stop a rally, but temper rallies. I wouldn't be looking for $700 canola on the board. But if we could pick up $30 to $40 a ton on that, gives a guy 21 cents a pound, that'd probably be pretty good.
At some point, we got a bin space issue, do we not?
Yes, in western North Dakota, we've got a lot of bins full right now. Yeah. I've got guys telling me they got bags they got to pick up. I've got guys trying to figure out what to do with the bags, if they're going to build more bins to take the crop out of the bag. I really don't recommend that, But there's a lot of crop. The weather was awesome last year. It was great for me personally. We got some cows. We put up some hay. But, it's created, I don't want to say a good problem to have, but it's created a problem where we've got a lot of bushels and not necessarily the infrastructure to handle it all.
I was hearing earlier from somebody from North Dakota, they think the moisture situation is pretty decent, and we're expecting an early spring in North Dakota.
Well, right now, before I came down here on Monday, I was wearing a T-shirt putting hay out, and then I drove an hour and a half to the airport in a blizzard the very next morning. But
that's North Dakota for you.
Yeah, welcome to North Dakota. Right now it looks good for most of the state. There's some pockets that are dry, but where I'm at, which is kind of western North Dakota, we're never more than 2 weeks away from a drought. Yeah. And, we could use some snow. We could dang sure use some rain this spring. But if the longer-term forecasts hold, it's going to be an early spring.
Tyler, thanks a lot for joining us here today for our discussion. Always enjoy it, and enjoy the rest of the Commodity Classic.
Thanks. Good to see you, Shaun.
That was Tyler Schau from agmarket.net. It definitely appears that there's should be some concern and something for you to be following if you are still looking to move some of that 23 crop. Maybe it's wheat, maybe it's canola. Obviously, there's a lot of corn in the Midwest that qualifies for this statement. There is a lot of old crop still on farm. And as we get close, there's like a countdown on the clock because eventually we got to harvest the 24 crop. And that creates this bind of where am I going to put it? Am I going to, put it all in bags and I'm going to have a bunch of 23 and 24 on the farm at one time? Or, do I need to clear out some of these bins, market some of this crop so that I can create some room, right? And so every farm's going to be individually, there's going to be, that's an individual decision for you based on your circumstances, and obviously your cash flow and all those kinds of things factor into this as well. But it does, one of the things that comes with that is some selling pressure and what that does to some of the cash prices that are out there and how that impacts some of the basis and things like that. So it was very hit home to me last week at Commodity Classic. In general, and you know what, commodity analysts have been saying this since last July, on the 23 crop, farmers are undersold. And it's that continues today, and it's all in hindsight too, right? There's a lot of holders' regret out there, but it's what you do going forward now in order to try to steer your way through this. And when I talked to Matt Bennett from agmarket.net last week, he had said to me, if you're selling 23 corn today, you're losing money. Somebody told me yesterday in Camrose, if you're selling 23 canola today with these prices, you're probably losing money. So these are the things that producers are going through, which also lends itself to what we've seen in the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index when it comes to some of the negativity around farm financial performance, current and future. So this is where we've really got to be. We got to be on the top of our game when it comes to running our businesses. And the marketing is a part of that, but also just tying that marketing into your cost of production and managing your business from a financial perspective. This is where I said to the crowd yesterday in Camrose, and I'll say the same thing to the Alberta sugar beet growers when I present to them this afternoon. is this is where we really do separate a little bit of the wheat from the chaff. And I've been hearing about this from a lot of you that have been writing into me about the current environment. Is, 2 years ago, if you got good weather, anybody can make money in that environment from a cropping perspective. Okay? Today is different. And those are your words. That's what you've been sending me and telling me. So strong balance sheet, net working capital, all of those fundamentals that we hear about all the time, it's very, very true here in 24. So, yeah, it's 24 definitely different than 23, way different than 22 and 21. And that's true agronomically, and it also is from a financial environment as well. So as Tyler said there, we need some demand we really need demand to be strong in 24 here. I was telling audiences, I was really speaking about this from a beef perspective for a while, where beef cannot afford demand hiccups given some of the pricing out there and some of the supply that's out there. And commodities are really like that too. We need this global economy to really get going, to really bustle along. So there's some strength in the commodity demand, which is going to pull some of this inventory out of the system, and we can live to fight another day here instead of talking about gluts of grain and things like that. So it definitely is a key piece, and probably one of the first things your mind will jump to is when central banks start to lower those interest rates. That could be like a signal of, okay, now we're going to get going. But that decision continues to get pushed back further and further out in the calendar year here in 24. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk to today's show sponsor, Koch Agronomic Services. You're listening to RealAg Radio.
There's power, and then there's superpower. Advancing the unstoppable superpower of pre-seed from New Farm. Take control. Eliminate weed competition and start clean in spring. Manage weeds early in canola, cereals, and pulses. Conquer, Goldwing, Thunderhawk, and Blackhawk EVO. Convenient formulations and multiple modes of action. Add more power to glyphosate, more benefits to your burn down. Go to newfarm.ca/burndown.
If you have a growing list of questions about getting more from your fields, know that Koch Agronomic Services has an answer for every acre. With a full spectrum of nutrient management, nutrient protection, and seed enhancement options, Koch Agronomic Services offers a deep portfolio of agronomically effective products. Each designed to enhance yield potential, all available to help solve your problems. Find the answer that's right for your acres. Start by visiting kochag.ca. That's KOCH ag.ca.
At Vaterstad, we aim to be the world's leading partner for outstanding emergence. We're doing that through innovative tillage, planting, and seeding equipment that's optimized for your field conditions and soil types. We also offer industry-leading capacities to help you get the job done in shorter windows of time. It's all designed to give your crop the best start possible so you can maximize yields. Vaterstad, we look forward to growing together.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio. I am Lindsay Smith. Today's show, of course, brought to you by Koch Agronomic Services. And joining me now is Bryce Geisel. He's a senior agronomist for the company. Bryce, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How about you?
I'm doing well. All right. So we are into March, which is super exciting from my standpoint because it sort of feels like, this is the promise of spring. And of course, with spring, we think seeding. We also, of course, have to think about our nitrogen. So what should farmers be keeping in mind about protecting nitrogen this spring?
Well, the main thing to keep in mind that there are 3 forms of nitrogen loss. However, the key one with spring nitrogen applications is volatilization. And in order to mitigate it, we need to inhibit the specific enzymes in the soil to keep that nitrogen in the field. And really, to do that effectively, we need inhibitors with the right rate of active ingredients.
All right. Okay. So I need to be thinking about the right product, but why does the right rate matter when it comes to nitrogen stabilizers themselves?
Well, we know from research trials that when not using the proper rates, your nitrogen is not as safe as you think it is. Unfortunately, not all products have the same or even comparable rates of active ingredient and use rates. And to understand the actual amounts being used, we really need to go back and compare apples to apples. First, we need to calculate parts per million. And once you have that information, you can see if there's enough active ingredient to be agronomically effective. The reality is that some products on the market have extremely low rates of active ingredient concentrations once applied to your nitrogen.
So how then, though, if I want to make the best decision for the fertilizer that I've got, how do I know the level of rate or that the product that I'm using has got the right amount of stabilizer in it?
There are lots of good sources that you can kind of utilize to find that information. It's always good to talk to an agronomist, talk to the manufacturer, to your retail, and have those questions. Really what we need to go back is find that percent active ingredient, and that comes from those product labels. You need to know the use rate, and then you also need to find out the bulk density of the product so you can kind of do that conversion. Because really when we go to a ppm measurement, that parts per million, what we're trying to do is compare, the actual weight of how much active ingredient is going down in terms of comparing that to the amount of nitrogen that's going down. And that gives you a good comparison because all these different products do have different active ingredient rates per liter, and they're going on at different use rates on your metric tons of your nitrogen.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's a really good point because, of course, if we're going to go to the extra step of choosing the correct stabilizer or protectant for our nitrogen fertilizer, we also have to make sure it's going to do the job that we want it to do. So in that way, how do the products that Koch Agronomic Services offer, how do they measure up when it comes to active ingredients?
No, that's a great question. So our products are the standard that researchers use here in Canada and are scientifically proven to work. A nitrogen stabilizer like Anvil is a long-lasting solution that protects against the primary source of loss in spring nitrogen application, which is volatilization. But we do have other products, so like Super U and Tribune are dual inhibitors, and these have high levels of active ingredients as well, and they protect against all three forms of loss, so volatilization, leaching, and denitrification. You can find a comparison of various nitrogen stabilizers at defendyourn.ca. And there you can learn more about active ingredient rates and see how other products stack up to our agronomically effective solutions.
All right, Bryce, we are, of course, going to be in the thick of the seeding season before you know it. Is this a conversation that you would suggest farmers are having sooner than later? Are we all systems go for seeding regardless? What should farmers be doing now to take action on this?
So it's a great time to have a conversation with your agronomist and your retailers, whoever's kind of you're bouncing ideas off. And a lot of these different products, whether we want to look at just volatilization losses or all three forms loss, is going to depend on your nitrogen source as well as on your application practices. So every farm is going to be different, every condition is going to be different, and it's kind of good to have those conversations so that you are using the right product for the right application. Having those conversations earlier is going to be a great time to have it because then you're going to spring ready to roll.
All right, Bryce, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining us on the show today.
All right, thank you.
All right, we'll be back with more of RealAg Radio right after this.
If I asked you, what's the most important tool on your farm, you'd probably think of tractors, trucks, and implements first. But it's actually something much bigger than that. Your soil is the most important equipment you own. The real question is, are you doing enough to keep it running at peak performance? Nutrien Smart Nutrition MAP plus MST is engineered with patented micronized sulfur technology to refuel your soil for maximum yields. Learn how to tune up your soil at smartnutritionmst.com.
CDC Endure is a new oat line from Alliance Seed. High yielding with excellent disease resistance and the quality end users ask for, all in one great oat variety. CDC Endure provides the high beta-glucan levels to make heart-healthy products like breakfast cereals. For more information on CDC Endure Oats, as well as any other products from Alliance Seed, check out allianceseed.com or visit any Alliance Seed authorized retailers.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio, brought to you today by Koch Agronomic Services. Make sure you're going to kochag.ca. That is KOCHAG.ca. It is great to have Koch Agronomic Services on board with RealAg Radio. Okay, let's dive in right now to some data around our Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index related to future farm financial performance. And as you have been hearing me say on the show, there is definitely some concern out there broadly with farmers and ranchers when it comes to future farm financial performance. Now, overall, the future farm financial performance is like in the high 60s out of 200. So it's 100 is neutral. If you're in the 60s, you're pretty pessimistic about your future farm financial performance. So looking ahead, do you think that a year from now your operation will be better off financially, worse off, or just about the same? Okay, so people feeling worse off than today. And we talked about the markets earlier. I think it's self-explanatory as to the why. Now, there is a sector or a group of agriculture that may be thinking a little bit differently, though, about this, and that's the livestock sector, okay? So we've separated out, do you have primarily crops, primarily livestock, or both crops and livestock? Okay, so you're a mixed farm. Here's what's interesting. If you're primarily crops, okay, so you're a row cropper or you're a broadacre farmer, you're currently looking at your future farm financial performance at 60. Okay? Now, the range since September of 22, then the 60 is a low. The highest we ever got actually is going back only to October, where it was 86. So that we've dropped from 86 to 60 in 3 months, because this data is from January. If we look at primarily livestock, it's actually 98. It's neutral. Now, the range there since September of 22, you'd have to go back to March of 23, where it was a 119. Okay? It did get as low as 79 in July, so it fell off fairly quickly from that March high. Was 102 in October, and this past January, like I mentioned, was 98. So primarily livestock, 98, essentially neutral compared to primarily crops at 60. If we look at both crops and livestock, this is a mixed operation, 75. Okay, and the range has been anywhere from 75, which is the low, all the way to 96, and that 96 was back a year ago, January of 2023. So primarily livestock feeling better about their future farm financial performance than the croppers, and I think that's what we would assume, but it's nice to have the data that does showcase that. Now, let's dig a little bit deeper into the livestock and the why of this a little bit. So what we've done is we've separated out supply managed versus non-supply managed in the livestock sector. So supply managed is turkey, chicken, of course we have dairy, okay? And then there's all the exportable commodities. So non-supply managed is 74 on future farm financial performance. Supply managed is 86. Now, also I want to point out this, and this is also what we would expect. The future farm financial performance since July is virtually unchanged for supply managed commodities. 84, 86, and 86. Okay, it really has not moved. The outlook really hasn't changed when it comes to future farm financial performance. When we look at the non-supply managed commodities, where these are the exportable commodities like beef and pork, for example, there's more volatility. There's a little bit more bouncing around. It's been 83, 95, and now down to 74. So back in October, non-supply managed commodities or livestock producers felt better about their future farm financial performance than the supply managed commodities. But that has changed in January. In January, non-supply managed is 74, supply managed is 86. Okay, so what else can we tell you about the livestock as it applies to financial performance? Well, some of this also ties to the fact of confidence in marketing livestock. Okay, so we asked some marketing questions, as you know. So how confident are you in marketing your livestock today compared to a year ago? From an index perspective, out of 200, it's a 119.6. Now remember that when it comes to the broader, all farmers and ranchers, the confidence number is down at 75. So livestock producers clearly more confident in marketing their livestock right now than their cropping peers. What we can also say to you is outlook on livestock markets. Okay, so which best describes your outlook on livestock margins? And this is putting This is the gross livestock. So this is all livestock margins. Okay, so this is beef and pork and dairy and lamb and everything. Okay, now when it comes to all, like the aggregate, all farmers, the number there was about 95, it looks like. Okay, when we look at just livestock, the outlook on livestock margins is a 152.8. Livestock producers feeling very strong about the direction of the livestock markets, and that's reflected also in their margins here based on this data from January. 76% of livestock producers said they feel positive margins for livestock in the year ahead, whereas 23.6% said negative margins for livestock in the year ahead. And if you look at the direction that we have seen from the commodities like corn and wheat, obviously that's bad or negative for crop farmers, but it is some feed cost relief for livestock producers. And also we've seen some pretty strong markets overall when it comes to things like some of the livestock prices out there. So yeah, definitely, and in that non-supply managed category of ours, definitely a pretty heavy weighting towards beef. And we're looking at feeder cattle this fall that could be once again setting some pretty record prices when it comes to what. And you know what, for the rancher, it's a long time coming. And sustained profits will, along with some rain and a nice weather pattern, will eventually lead us to not only a market signal, but the capability to actually maybe retain more of those females and start to think about maybe expanding that cow herd just a little bit. So there's some data, Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index related to livestock producers. Would be very curious what your thoughts are on this, especially as it pertains to what questions would you like answered going forward, right? I've got lots of thoughts and I've got lots of questions in terms of when we get to April, when we do our next intake here in a few weeks for the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. But if you have some things that you I really wonder if this is what's driving farmer decision making, or this is what I'm thinking of my farm. I wonder if more people aren't under the same impression or dealing with the same constraints or barriers. Please reach out. Of course, the email is shaney@realagriculture.com, and the RealAg feedback line is 855-776-6147. That's the beauty of Real Agri Studies, is we get out of the, well, here's what I think, or here's my perception, or here's what I'm assuming, and this is the farmer speaking with one voice, not necessarily a unified voice or everybody thinking the same, but it does allow us to better understand what you are dealing with, and I think that's important for the rest of the industry. And also we can learn from each other as well, right? If you are down on your current farm financial performance, you can see that you got a lot of you're in welcome company. There's a lot of people struggling right now with that current farm financial performance indeed. But like we just heard, the livestock sector feeling a little bit better right now about themselves here in 24 than some of their cropping peers indeed. Okay, let's take a break, and when we come back, we are going to get to the top ag news stories today. Today's show is brought to you by Koch Agronomic Services.
Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
What's next for your fields? At Pioneer, delivering industry-leading genetics drives everything we do. From the scientists in the lab to our local teams with boots on the ground. We are determined to get there first. Developing top-performing products, proven in more growing conditions than ever before. Pioneer. What's next happens here. Visit pioneer.com/Canada to learn more.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on this Wednesday. Today's show is brought to you by Koch Agronomic Services. Encourage you to go to kochag.ca to check out the entire portfolio and product lineup of Koch Agronomic Services. When you're thinking this spring about crop nutrition and fertilization, that's your one-stop shop. So please check it out, Koch Agronomic Services. Okay, let's dive into the top ag news stories of the day. And, of course, we had a press conference yesterday. This ties very closely to Canada and, of course, the U.S. But Bayer's CEO has ruled out the possibility of spinning off the company's crop science division as a separate business. So in a news conference on Tuesday, Bill Anderson said the company has completed a thorough review of its current structure, which includes 3 divisions, so pharmaceuticals, consumer health, and crop science. He said the company will not be moving ahead with the breakup, despite pressure from investors who are frustrated with Bayer's financial performance. So since that acquisition of Monsanto, going back to, 2018? Things have been not going very good. And a lot of that has to do with the lawsuits. So he did mention the lawsuits as a part of 4 things kind of really holding Bayer back. He said the company is facing 4 major challenges: ongoing litigation against glyphosate in the U.S., the loss of exclusivities in pharmaceuticals, high debt levels, and internal bureaucracy. So I don't know if you've been following it, but Bayer has also been launching a new operating system, a new operating model for their how they function as a company. I forget the acronym for it, but essentially trying to remove some of the layers between the CEO and the customer, increasing the amount of direct reports that management would have, and reducing the number of levels of middle management, trying to get closer to the customer for some of the white collar executive staff. As for the glyphosate court cases, which are inherited from the $63 billion purchase of Monsanto, Anderson said while the company is seeing an average reduction in court-awarded amounts of 90%, Bayer is looking to resolve more cases outside of the courts. So now, back to, are we going to spin off the crop science division? He was quoted as saying, "In short, on the question of structure, our answer is not now, and this shouldn't be misunderstood as never." So it's now, rather than making a structural change, Anderson said they're focused on overhauling internal operations, which includes reducing the number of employees. I sort of got to that. He did mention a public offering for one of the divisions, such as crop science, would require an all-hands-on-deck effort for up to 2 years, delaying revenues and jeopardizing access to financing. They also looked at selling a division, but Anderson said that the scenario would only be relevant for the consumer health business, which has a track record of positive financial results. Yeah, like if they were going to sell the crop science division today, who's stepping up to take on all that liability of the glyphosate court cases? They have to put those court cases behind them in order to explore that opportunity. I think that's some of the writing kind of on the wall from this announcement from yesterday. The Bank of Canada has held its benchmark interest rate steady for the 5th consecutive time in a tight-lipped decision that offered few hints about the timing of future rate cuts. The widely anticipated move keeps the policy interest rate at 5%, a level reached last July after one of the most aggressive monetary policy tightening campaigns in Canadian history, which was aimed at tackling runaway price increases. The rate of inflation has fallen considerably over the past 18 months, and economic growth in Canada has slowed to a crawl under the weight of elevated borrowing costs. At this point, central bank officials think further rate hikes are unlikely, but they're not yet willing to entertain rate cuts, which would offer relief to homeowners with mortgages and businesses struggling to pay debts. And this has been common with the Federal Reserve, the Bank of Canada, and some other central banks. You've heard me talk about this. At the end of 2023, a lot of people were betting that we were going to see somewhere between 3 and 6 rate cuts in 2024. This continues, the first one continues to get pushed back further and further and further. It's clear that central bankers are executing real patience here. And if they are going to move, they want to be sure that the timing is right. It would appear, if you look at the patience they're exhibiting now, if the data kind of holds the way that it is and the writing stays the same, you got to think we're not going to see like a series of months consecutive of rate cuts. You think when they do get started, you think that we would see some patience there as well. So if you were banking as a farmer on getting some relief from some of your carrying costs of your debt, it's not happening super fast here in 24. And I was listening this morning to Bloomberg Radio, and basically they had someone on there from J.P. Morgan talking about we're talking Q4 cuts is when she said there was a bond analyst saying that when she thought it was going to happen. Now, Land O'Lakes, which obviously has large ag ties, story about them in the Wall Street Journal, and I found this kind of interesting. This has to do with labor. And of course, labor's hard to come by. It's hard to find workers right now in agriculture. And one of the things that happens in the corporate world is there's the flex time, flex hours are being used to try to recruit staff as one of the perks, the benefits. And a lot of times we hear in agriculture, well, that doesn't work for us. Now, I do know of a couple of farms that do shift work in some sort of like flex time from a team perspective. Of course, there's got to be somebody there around the combine. There's a story in the Wall Street Journal about Land O'Lakes and what they're doing. So this is from the Journal. Until last April, there had been just 2 ways to make 350,000 pounds of cheese a day at the Land O'Lakes plant. Start at 5 in the morning and work until 5 at night, or the other way around. Rigid factory shifts were the default for churning out cheddar, as they are at factories that the world over that make all kinds of products. The most efficient way to keep production humming uninterrupted 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, is to start and end in unison, bundling dozens of individuals' efforts into a single unit of labor. At Land O'Lakes, these days are over. They ended late last year when the member-owned cooperative began hiring for a handful of roles in its Melrose plant, along with a few of its animal feed facilities that let employees choose their own start times and shift lengths. It worked. This is kind of cool. Okay, so the story continues. Those positions proved easier to fill than full-time openings and had the knock-on benefit of boosting retention. Looking to duplicate those successes, the company has rolled out what it calls its Flex Work program at 60 of its 140 sites and plans to expand it to all of its factories in coming years. Land O'Lakes is making these changes because, like many manufacturing firms, it is struggling to fill positions even as labor market cools, making it ever harder to keep up with the demand. This problem is set to worsen in years to come as the rapid aging of the U.S. population continues to constrain the supply of would-be workers. So there you go. That's from the Wall Street Journal. You can check that out online. And so it makes me wonder, is this more of a pattern? If they can do it at Land O'Lakes, could you do it on your farm? Is this one of the strategies that we're going to see a little bit more of in the future? Definitely it is possible. Kubota, a Japanese agricultural equipment manufacturer, is exploring the possibility of producing batteries internally for its electric farm machinery. With upcoming product launches in the U.S. and Europe, Kubota anticipates increased demand for electric versions of its farm equipment. Currently, the company manufactures diesel engines in Thailand and Japan, shipping them to various markets for final assembly. Similarly, Kubota aims to produce batteries locally in Thailand for Asia and domestically in Japan, the U.S. and Europe. While Kubota presently rents out electric tractors in Europe and assembles them with batteries in existing facilities, the company may establish a dedicated battery factory in Japan, depending on demand. AGI is out with their fourth quarter and full year earnings for the back end of 2023. A couple things. Fourth quarter had revenue of $379 million, increased by 1% on a year-over basis. And adjusted EBITDA in the Q4 was at $73 million, increased by 43% on a year-over-year basis. For the full year, adjusted EBITDA margin percent increased by roughly 320 basis points to 19.3% from 16.1% on a year-over-year basis. I would qualify when I read this, I haven't read some of the market analyst reaction, but good year for AGI. is sort of how I took it. And based on all the storage that we have on farm, maybe it's going to be another good year for bin sales here in 24 if people are going to hold on to that 23 crop a little bit longer. In regards to the Farm Bill in the U.S., yesterday I got a number of questions at the Crop Management Services meeting, Crop Management Network meeting that I spoke to in Camrose. There was a number of questions about the Farm Bill. Well, the update is, this according to Pro Farmer, it looks like the House will issue their version of a Farm Bill after the Easter recess. That squares with prior signals that it would come following congressional completion of FY 2024 spending measures. The timeline gets murkier in the Senate, where positions by Ag Panel Chair Debbie Stabenow, Democrat from Michigan, and other Democrats make funding and policy compromises nearly impossible to bridge. It'll be interesting to see if the House releases a budget score on their eventual proposals. So, we are still really, really moving along at a bit of a snail's pace when it comes to the Farm Bill. And Jim Wiesmeyer from Pro Farmer always tells me, don't make a prediction on the year, but it's hard to be optimistic here in this election year and Congress's inability to really come to sort of some conclusions on things, the lack of compromise. It's pretty slow. Recent assessment shows a 22% drop in U.S. soybean oil carbon footprint. So a recent life cycle assessment conducted by Sustainable Solutions Corporation, the United Soybean Board, and the National Oilseed Processors Association reveals a significant 22% reduction in the carbon footprint associated with U.S. soybean oil production from 2015 to 21. This decrease is attributed to improvements in cultivation, harvesting, transportation, and processing stages of soy production. The findings are particularly relevant as the soybean oil serves as a crucial feedstock for biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel production in the United States. And this is the kind of data that the industry needs as it pushes forward on trying to really show that soybeans and also canola fit very, very well and have environmental stories to tell. And so when we're talking about the carbon intensity score and that kind of reduction, we're telling a really, really good news story, and not one that reduction didn't happen because there was some sort of carbon tax or a price on carbon, or we somehow influenced the way that farmers should be growing something. It was being driven by ROI and good agronomics and things like that. So that is very much a positive story. Need more of that kind of data more frequently. Well, I'm really looking forward today. As soon as I finish the show here, going to head over to one of the hotels here in Lethbridge and speak to the Alberta Sugar Beet Growers annual meeting. Looking forward to that. Going to have some fun, a lot of friendly faces. That's an event because it's local. I'm going to know about 90% of the crowd. It's like a high school reunion, more like. So looking forward to that. Lots happening, of course, in the world of sugar beet growers indeed, and looking forward to hearing what's happening with them and sharing some of my perspectives on what's happening in the industry of agriculture here in Canada and, of course, the United States as well. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms, or you are definitely more than welcome to call the Real Ag feedback line. That number is 855-776-6147. Big shout out and thanks to Koch Agronomic Services for being the sponsor of today's show. For balanced nutrition with micronutrients, the best answer is Wolftrax DDP from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how Wolftrax can ensure nutrient availability through a crop's growth cycle, visit kochag.ca. Wolftrax and more at that site, so please check it out. Thanks everybody for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, brought to you today by Koch Agronomic Services.
Thanks for downloading this RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by Focus Herbicide from FMC. Lentil and wheat growers get a clean start this spring with Focus Herbicide. Along with early burn-off and extended weed control, Focus Herbicide provides excellent resistance management. See your local retailer today.